My hands were shaking as I stood in our bedroom, staring at the open suitcase on the bed. I'd just gotten home from work, expecting a quiet Wednesday night with my wife of 10 years, Emily. But instead, I found something that hit me like a freight train. Tucked inside her suitcase, beneath a pile of neatly folded clothes, was a black lace bra I'd never seen before, and a handwritten note that read, "Can't wait for this weekend, babe. Jake." My stomach dropped. Emily was downstairs, humming in the kitchen like nothing was wrong, but my world was already spinning out of control. Who the hell was Jake? And why was my wife packing lingerie for a weekend I knew nothing about? I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as anger and betrayal clawed at me. 10 years of marriage, countless nights spent building a life together, and now this? I shoved the note back into the suitcase and stormed downstairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Emily looked up from the stove, smiling that warm smile I'd always loved, and said, "Hey, honey, dinner's almost ready. How was your day?" Her voice was so casual, so normal, it made my skin crawl. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and shaky. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. She frowned, wiping her hands on a towel, and turned to face me. "What's wrong, Mike? You look upset." "Upset?" I barked, unable to hold it in. "I just found something in your suitcase, Emily. A bra I've never seen and a note from some guy named Jake. Care to explain that?" Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw a panic flicker in her eyes before she masked it with a forced laugh. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand like it was nothing. "It's not what you think. Jake's just a friend from work. We're planning a little team-building trip next weekend. I was going to tell you about it tonight." She stepped closer, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. "A team-building trip?" I snapped. "With lingerie and a note that says, 'Can't wait for this weekend, babe'? You think I'm stupid?" My voice was rising now, and I didn't care. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Emily's smile faded, and she took a deep breath, her expression shifting to something colder, more calculated. "Okay, fine," she said, crossing her arms. "You want the truth? Yes, I'm going away with Jake next weekend. And yes, it's more than just a work thing. I've been thinking about this for a while, Mike. I love you, and I don't want to lose what we have, but I need this. I need to feel alive again. It's not going to change how I feel about you." I stared at her, dumbfounded. My wife, my Emily, was standing there, calmly telling me she was planning to cheat on me, like it was no big deal. "Are you serious?" I choked out. "You love me, but you're going to sleep with some other guy? And you expect me to just be okay with that?" "I'm not asking you to like it," she said, her voice steady. "I'm asking you to trust me. It's just physical. It won't mean anything emotionally. I'll be honest with you about everything, and we can work through it together. If you really love me, you'll understand." "Understand?" I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. "You've lost your damn mind, Emily. I'm not going to sit here and let you screw some guy while I wait at home like a good little husband. That's not love. That's betrayal." She flinched, but her resolve didn't waver. "I've already made plans," she said quietly. "Jake and I are leaving next Friday. I was hoping you'd come around by then, but if you can't, I'll still go. I need this, Mike. I'm sorry." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the stove. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My wife was choosing another man over me, over our marriage, and she didn't even seem to care. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my mind racing. I couldn't stay there, not with her. I grabbed my keys and headed for the guest room, slamming the door behind me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my anger turning into something darker, something determined. If Emily thought I'd just roll over and take this, she was dead wrong. I was going to find out everything about this Jake guy, and I was going to make sure she regretted ever thinking she could pull this off. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room with a pounding headache and a fire in my chest that wouldn't quit. Emily's words from last night kept replaying in my head. "I need this, Mike. I'm sorry." Sorry? She wasn't sorry. She was planning to rip my heart out and expected me to smile about it. I couldn't let that happen. I needed answers about Jake, about her plans, about how long this had been going on behind my back. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to destroy our marriage. I was going to fight. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and headed downstairs. Emily was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was just another day. She glanced at me, her expression neutral, and said, "Morning. Want some coffee?" I ignored her, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door without a word. I couldn't stand looking at her, not after what she'd said. I drove to work, my mind racing, and by the time I got to my desk, I had a plan. I called my boss and told him I needed a few days off for a personal emergency. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Take care of yourself, Mike," and that was that. First thing I did was head to an electronics store. I bought 3 voice-activated recorders, small, discreet ones I could hide around the house and in her car. Then I picked up 2 GPS trackers, the kind you can slip into a wallet or under a car seat without anyone noticing. If Emily was serious about this weekend with Jake, I was going to know every move she made. I wasn't messing around. When I got home, she was still at work, so I got busy. I hid one recorder under the kitchen counter, another in our bedroom near the nightstand, and the third in her car, taped under the driver's seat. The GPS trackers went into her wallet, slipped into a side pocket she never used, and under the passenger seat of her Honda. I tested everything to make sure it worked, and it did. Perfectly. Next, I went to our cell phone provider. Since I was the account holder, it was easy to get a full printout of her call and text logs. The guy behind the counter didn't even blink when I asked for it. I took the stack of papers to my car and started scanning through them. That's when I saw it. A number she'd been texting and calling almost daily for the past month. It wasn't saved under a name, just a raw number, but it showed up too often to be a coincidence. My gut told me it was Jake. I jotted it down and kept digging. Back at home, I fired up my laptop and decided to check her email. I knew her main account password. It was the same one she'd used for years, but I found something else. A second email account linked to her phone that I'd never seen before. It took me a few tries, but I guessed the password, her maiden name, and our wedding year. Sloppy, Emily. Real sloppy. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Dozens of messages between her and some guy named Jake Carter. Work emails at first, then flirty ones, and finally, plans for next weekend. Hilton in Kansas City. One email read, Room 125, Friday to Sunday. I'll pick you up at 1 p.m. Can't wait to get you alone. Another from Emily. I'm so excited, Jake. I've been thinking about this for weeks. Bought something special to wear for you. My hands clenched into fists as I read that. She'd been planning this for weeks, and I'd had no clue. I set the account to forward all new emails to a burner address I created, making sure she wouldn't notice. Then I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my mind spinning. Jake Carter. I didn't know him, but I was going to find out everything about him. I grabbed my phone and searched his name online. It didn't take long to find a LinkedIn profile, Jake Carter, 38, project manager at Emily's company. Smug-looking guy with a slick smile and a bio full of corporate buzzwords. So this was the bastard trying to ruin my life. I saved his photo and kept digging, but I needed more than a profile. I needed to know what he was planning with my wife. That night, Emily came home and tried to act normal, asking how my day was. I gave her one-word answers, keeping my distance. She didn't push it, probably figuring I was still mad, which I was. After dinner, I waited until she was in the shower to grab her phone. She'd left it on the counter, and her passcode was the same as always, our anniversary date. I scrolled through her texts with that number I'd found. More flirty messages, more plans for the weekend. Can't wait to see you in that new outfit, Jake had written. You're going to drive me wild. My stomach churned, but I kept going. I forwarded a few key texts to myself, then deleted the evidence from her sent folder. I slipped the phone back just as she stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her. Everything okay? She asked, eyeing me suspiciously. Yeah, I lied, forcing a tight smile. Just checking the weather. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Didn't matter. I had what I needed. That night, I lay in the guest room again, listening to the faint hum of the recorder I'd hidden in our bedroom. I didn't know what I'd hear when I checked it later, but I knew one thing for sure. Emily and Jake weren't going to get away with this. I was going to turn their little weekend into a nightmare they'd never forget. The next day, Friday, I woke up with a knot in my stomach and a plan in my head. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not after what I'd found in Emily's emails and texts. She was serious about this weekend with Jake, and I was serious about stopping it. I didn't know how far I'd go yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I grabbed the recorder from the bedroom while Emily was downstairs getting ready for work. I played it back in the guest room, keeping the volume low so she wouldn't hear. Most of it was just her moving around, getting ready for bed, But then I caught something that made my blood boil. She'd been on the phone with Jake late last night, after I'd gone to the guest room. "Mike's still upset," she'd said, her voice hushed but clear. "I don't think he's going to come around, but I don't care. I'm still going with you. I need this, Jake. I feel trapped here." Jake's voice came through, smooth and cocky. "Don't worry, babe. We'll have the best weekend. Just stick to the plan. I'll pick you up at 1 next Friday, and we'll be gone before he knows it." Emily laughed, a soft, excited laugh I hadn't heard in years. "I can't wait," she said. "I've got everything packed. It's going to be perfect." I stopped the recording, my hands trembling with rage. She didn't just want to cheat, she was excited about it. She was laughing about leaving me behind. I saved the audio to my laptop and checked the GPS trackers. The one in her wallet showed she was still at home, but the car tracker confirmed it hadn't moved yet. Good. I had time. I headed downstairs, where Emily was pouring coffee into a travel mug. She glanced at me and said, "I'm heading to work. We should talk tonight, okay?" "Sure," I said, keeping my voice flat. "We'll talk." She nodded, grabbed her keys, and left. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. I checked her email again. More messages from Jake. He'd sent her a photo of the Hilton in Kansas City, room 125, with a caption, "Our little getaway spot. Can't wait to see you there." Emily had replied, "It looks amazing. I'm counting the days." I forwarded those to my burner account, then deleted the evidence from her sent folder. I needed more than emails and recordings, though. I needed proof that would hold up if this went legal. I drove to a hardware store and bought a couple of tiny HD cameras, fiber optic ones that could stream live footage to my laptop. They were pricey, but worth it. I also picked up a can of pepper spray, not sure yet how I'd use it, but knowing it might come in handy. When I got home, I tested the cameras in the guest room. The video quality was crystal clear, and the audio picked up every sound. Perfect. I'd set them up in their hotel room somehow. I just had to figure out how to get in. That night, Emily came home and tried to start a conversation. "Mike, can we sit down and talk about this?" she asked, her tone soft but firm. I nodded, and we sat at the kitchen table. She took a deep breath and started. "I know you're upset, and I get it. But I've thought about this a lot, and I'm going ahead with my plans next weekend. Jake and I have it all set. I'm not asking for your permission, but I'm hoping you'll understand. I still love you, and I don't want to lose you." I stared at her, my jaw tight. "You don't want to lose me, but you're going to sleep with another guy? How does that even make sense, Emily? You're throwing away 10 years of marriage for some fling. Do you really think I'm going to sit here and be okay with that?" "I'm not throwing anything away," she said, her voice rising. "This is something I need to do for myself. It's not about you. It's about me feeling alive again. If you love me, you'll let me have this. I'll come back, and we can work through it." "Work through it?" I snapped, standing up. "You're delusional if you think I'm going to let you cheat on me, and then just pick up where we left off. I warned you last night, Emily. If you go through with this, there will be consequences." "I'm not joking." She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "What are you going to do, Mike? Divorce me? Kick me out? You wouldn't dare. You love me too much." "Don't test me," I said, my voice low and cold. "You're making a huge mistake, and you're going to regret it. This is your last chance to back out. Call it off with Jake, or you'll see what happens." Emily stood up, her face hard. "I've made up my mind. I'm going. You can't stop me." She turned and walked upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I sat there for a minute, my mind racing, then grabbed my phone and called a divorce lawyer I'd heard good things about, Tom Bradley. I got his voicemail and left a message. "Hey, this is Mike Thompson. I need to talk about filing for divorce. My wife's planning to cheat on me next weekend, and I've got evidence. Call me back." I hung up and checked the GPS tracker again. Emily's car was still in the driveway, but I knew she'd be leaving for work tomorrow. I had a week to get everything in place. I spent the rest of the night planning, mapping out the drive to Kansas City, figuring out how to get into room 125 before they did, and thinking about how to use the cameras and pepper spray. I wasn't just going to catch them in the act. I was going to make sure they paid for it. By the time I went to bed, I felt a strange mix of anger and calm. Emily thought she had the upper hand, but she had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning hit me like a brick. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with everything I'd found and everything I still had to do. Emily was downstairs, acting like nothing was wrong, humming some tune while she made breakfast. The smell of bacon drifted up to the guest room, but it didn't make me hungry. It made me sick. How could she be so calm when she was about to blow up our marriage? I grabbed my phone and checked the GPS trackers. Her car was still in the driveway, and her wallet was in the kitchen, right where she'd left it last night. Good. I had time to keep moving forward with my plan. Tom Bradley, the divorce lawyer, called me back around 9. "Mike, I got your message," he said, his voice steady and professional. "Sounds like a messy situation. If you've got evidence of infidelity, we can make this a straightforward case. Adultery's still a solid ground for divorce in this state. Bring me what you have, and we'll get started." I told him I'd have more proof by Monday, emails, recordings, and video if everything went according to plan. He said that was plenty and scheduled me to come in first thing Monday morning. I hung up feeling a little steadier. At least I had someone in my corner. I spent the day gathering more gear and refining my strategy. I drove to Kansas City that afternoon. It was a 2-hour trip, and I wanted to scope out the Hilton. I parked across the street and watched the place for a while, noting the entrances, the parking lot, and the layout of the lobby. Room 125 was on the first floor, according to Jake's email, which made things easier. I walked inside, keeping my head down, and booked room 127 for Thursday night under a fake name, paying cash so it wouldn't trace back to me. It was right next to their room, close enough for my cameras to pick up a signal. I asked the clerk if I could check in early Thursday, and he said it wouldn't be a problem as long as the room was ready. Perfect. When I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and said, "Where have you been all day?" I shrugged and said, "Out. Needed some air." She nodded, but I could tell she was suspicious. Didn't matter. I wasn't going to give her anything to work with. That night, I waited until she was asleep to check the bedroom recorder again. Another call with Jake, this time shorter. "Mike's acting weird," she said. "I think he's up to something, but I don't know what. Doesn't matter. I'm still going." Jake laughed and said, "He can't stop us, babe. We're golden." I gritted my teeth and saved the file. They were so smug, so sure they'd get away with it. Not if I had anything to say about it. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I ignored Emily as much as possible, giving her the cold shoulder whenever she tried to talk. She kept pushing, though. Wednesday night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Mike, we need to talk about this," she said, her voice sharp. "You've been avoiding me all week. I'm leaving with Jake on Friday, and I want to know where we stand." I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Where we stand? You're the one walking out on our marriage, Emily. You tell me where we stand." "I'm not walking out," she said, her eyes flashing. "I'm taking a weekend for myself. I've told you, this isn't about us, it's about me. I'll come back, and we can figure things out. Why can't you see that?" "Because it's bullshit," I said, my voice rising. "You're going to sleep with another man and expect me to just wait here for you? That's not how marriage works. I've told you, Emily, if you do this, there's no coming back. This is your last chance to call it off." She stared at me, her jaw tight. "I'm not calling it off. I've made my decision. Jake's picking me up Friday at 1, and we're going to Kansas City. You can't change my mind." "Then you've made your choice," I said, my voice cold. "Don't expect me to be here when you get back." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, slamming the guest room door behind me. My heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. She'd chosen Jake over me, and now it was my turn to choose myself. Thursday morning, I went to work and requested the afternoon off, plus all of Friday. My boss didn't ask questions, just nodded and said, "Take care of yourself." I drove straight to Kansas City, checked into room 127 at the Hilton, and got to work. I'd brought the HD cameras, some duct tape, and a small toolkit. Getting into room 125 wasn't hard. The lock was standard, and I'd watched enough YouTube videos to figure out how to pick it with a cheap set of tools I'd bought online. I slipped inside, my heart racing, and set up the cameras. One went in the corner near the bed, hidden behind a lamp, and the other in the bathroom, taped under the sink. I tested the feed on my laptop. Everything was clear, audio and video. I also sprayed the pepper spray on a pair of towels in the bathroom, just enough to irritate skin if they used them. It wasn't much, but it'd throw a wrench in their plans. I left the room, locked it behind me, and went back to room 127 to monitor the feed. Everything was working. I packed up, checked out, and drove home, my mind buzzing with what was coming. When I got there, Emily was in the bedroom, packing her suitcase. She looked up and said, "You're home early." I nodded and said, "Yeah, had some stuff to take care of." She didn't push it, just kept packing. I saw the black lace bra from last week, along with other clothes I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face neutral. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about tomorrow, Friday, the day she'd leave with Jake. I had everything in place. The cameras, the trackers, the recordings. I was ready to catch them, to make them pay. Emily thought she was in control, but she had no idea what I'd set in motion. Tomorrow, the game would change, and I'd be the one calling the shots. Friday morning came too fast. I woke up in the guest room, my stomach churning with a mix of dread and determination. Today was the day Emily would leave with Jake, and I was ready to catch them in the act, or so I thought. I'd spent all week setting up cameras, trackers, and recordings, thinking I had everything under control. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and what happened next flipped my world upside down in a way I never saw coming. I got up, showered, and headed downstairs. Emily was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee and checking her phone. She glanced at me and said, "Morning. I'm leaving at 1. Jake's picking me up." Her voice was calm, like she was announcing a trip to the grocery store. I nodded, keeping my expression blank, and said, "Got it." She didn't say anything else, just went back to her phone. I grabbed my keys and left for my lawyer's office. Tom Bradley had everything ready. Divorce papers citing adultery, with Jake Carter named as the other man. I signed them, handed over the emails and recordings I'd gathered so far, and told him I'd have video evidence by Monday. He nodded and said, "This looks solid, Mike. I'll have these served to Emily and Jake Monday afternoon at their workplaces. We'll hit them hard." I thanked him and left, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. I drove home, parked a block away, and waited. At 12:45, I saw Jake's car, a black SUV, pull into our driveway. My heart pounded as I watched him get out, all confidence and swagger, and ring the doorbell. Emily stepped outside with her suitcase, smiling like a teenager on a first date. They hugged, then shared a long, deep kiss right there on our porch. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She glanced around, didn't see me, and climbed into his car. They drove off, and I followed at a distance, tracking them with the GPS in her wallet. The drive to Kansas City was uneventful. I stayed a few cars behind, watching the tracker on my phone. They checked into the Hilton around 3, and I parked across the street, pulling up the camera feed on my laptop. The footage from room 125 was live, clear video and audio, just like I'd planned. I watched as they walked in, laughing and touching each other like they didn't have a care in the world. Emily dropped her suitcase and pulled Jake into a kiss. My stomach twisted, but I kept watching. They moved to the bed, and things started heating up fast. I felt sick, but I couldn't look away, not yet. I needed this for the divorce case. Then it happened, the twist that changed everything. About 10 minutes into their makeout session, there was a knock at the door. Jake groaned, clearly annoyed, and got up to answer it. I expected a hotel staff member, maybe delivering towels or something. But when the door opened, a woman stormed in, her face red with fury. She was tall, blonde, and looked like she could break Jake in half if she wanted to. "You lying bastard," she screamed, shoving him back into the room. Emily jumped up, clutching a sheet to her chest, her eyes wide with panic. "Who the hell are you?" Emily yelled, but the woman ignored her, focusing on Jake. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Jake's wife. And you're the homewrecker he's been sneaking around with, aren't you?" My jaw dropped. Jake was married. This whole time, I'd assumed he was some single guy from Emily's office, but he had a wife, and she was here, ready to tear them both apart. Jake stammered, trying to calm her down. "Sarah, baby, it's not what it looks like. I can explain," but Sarah wasn't having it. She slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing through the camera's audio. "Don't lie to me. I found your emails, you idiot. I tracked your phone here. You thought you could sneak off for a weekend with this tramp, and I wouldn't find out." Emily looked like she was about to faint, her face pale and her hands trembling. "I didn't know he was married," Emily cried, backing away from Jake. "He told me he was single." "I swear, I wouldn't have," Sarah cut her off, turning on her with a glare that could melt steel. "Save it. You're just as guilty as he is. You think I care about your excuses? You're ruining my marriage too." I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind reeling. This was a game changer. Not only was Emily cheating on me, but Jake had been lying to her too. He'd dragged her into this mess under false pretenses, and now his wife was here to blow it all up. Part of me wanted to laugh. It was almost poetic, watching their plans crumble. But another part of me felt a surge of anger. Emily had chosen this guy over me, and he wasn't even honest with her. How could she be so stupid? The fight escalated fast. Sarah grabbed Jake's suitcase and started throwing his clothes out the door, screaming about divorce and lawyers. Jake tried to grab her arms, begging her to calm down, but she shoved him again, knocking him into the dresser. Emily was crying now, pulling on her clothes and shouting, "I didn't sign up for this. You lied to me, Jake." The room was chaos, and I couldn't look away. My cameras were catching every second of it. Gold for my divorce case, and maybe even something I could use to help Sarah if she wanted to take Jake down too. I leaned back in my seat, my heart racing. This wasn't what I'd expected, but it was better than I could have hoped. Emily and Jake weren't just going to pay for betraying me. They were going to pay for underestimating everyone around them. I grabbed my phone and started recording the laptop screen, making sure I had a backup of this insanity. The weekend wasn't over yet, and I had a feeling things were about to get even uglier. The hotel room on my laptop screen looked like a war zone. Sarah, Jake's wife, was still screaming, throwing his stuff around while Jake tried to dodge her fury. Emily was in the corner, half-dressed and sobbing, looking like she'd just woken up from a nightmare. I sat in my car across the street from the Hilton, watching it all unfold through the camera feed, my mind racing. This was better than I'd planned. Not only was Emily's weekend with Jake falling apart, but I had a front-row seat to their collapse, and it was all being recorded. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect setup for my divorce case. Sarah turned on Emily again, her voice sharp and venomous. "You think you're the only one he's done this with? He's been lying to me for years. You're just the latest idiot he's fooled." Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. He told me he was single. I never would have." Sarah cut her off with a bitter laugh. "Spare me. You didn't care enough to check. You wanted your little fling, and now you've got it. Enjoy the mess you've made." Jake stepped between them, holding up his hands. "Sarah, please, let's talk about this. I messed up, okay? I'll end it with her right now. We can fix this." Sarah glared at him, her eyes blazing. "Fix this? You think I'm going to take you back after this? I'm done, Jake. I'm calling my lawyer as soon as I leave here. You're going to lose everything. Me, the house, the kids. All for this." She gestured at Emily, who flinched like she'd been slapped. I couldn't help but smirk. Jake's world was crumbling, and Emily was caught in the crossfire. I kept the camera feed running, recording every word, every movement. This was pure gold, proof of adultery for my case, and maybe even leverage for Sarah if she wanted to team up against Jake. I grabbed my phone and dialed Tom Bradley, my lawyer. He picked up on the second ring. "Mike, what's up?" he asked. "You're not going to believe this," I said, keeping my voice low. "Jake's married. His wife just showed up at the hotel and caught him with Emily. It's a total shit show, and I've got it all on video. How does this affect the divorce?" Tom let out a low whistle. "That's a game changer. If his wife's filing too, we can coordinate with her lawyer. The more evidence we have of his infidelity, the stronger our cases get. Keep recording and bring everything to me Monday. We'll hit them both hard." I thanked him and hung up, my pulse racing. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about taking Jake down too. Back on the screen, Sarah stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Jake sank onto the bed, running his hands through his hair, while Emily stood there, still crying. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling. "You told me you were free to be with me. How could you do this?" Jake looked up at her, his face pale. "I didn't think she'd find out. I thought we could keep it quiet." "I'm sorry, Emily." "Sorry," she snapped, grabbing her suitcase. "You've ruined everything. Mike's going to divorce me. Your wife's going to divorce you. And I'm stuck in the middle of this mess because of your lies." She started packing, shoving clothes into her bag with shaky hands. Jake stood up, reaching for her. "Wait, we can figure this out. Let's just—" "No," Emily said, pulling away. "I'm done. I'm going home. I need to talk to Mike, see if there's any way to fix this." She zipped up her suitcase and headed for the door. Jake grabbed her arm, but she yanked it free and stormed out, leaving him alone in the room. I watched him sit back down, his head in his hands, looking like a man who'd just lost everything. Good. He deserved it. I checked the GPS tracker in Emily's wallet. She was moving, probably heading to the parking lot. I started my car and drove to a spot where I could intercept her on the way back to our house. I didn't want her getting home before me. I needed to control the narrative. About 20 minutes later, I saw her Honda pass by, her face pale and streaked with tears as she drove. I followed at a distance, my mind spinning with what to do next. When I got home, I parked in the garage and waited. Emily pulled in 10 minutes later, her suitcase in hand. She walked inside, saw me sitting on the couch, and froze. "Mike," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't expect you to be here. Where else would I be?" I said, keeping my tone cold. "I told you there'd be consequences if you went through with this. Looks like you found out the hard way." She dropped her suitcase and started crying again. "Jake lied to me. He's married. His wife showed up at the hotel and caught us. It was awful. I didn't know. Mike, I swear I didn't know." She took a step toward me, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Save it," I said. "You chose to cheat on me. Whether he was married or not doesn't change that. You walked out on our marriage, and now you're surprised it's falling apart? I warned you, Emily. I gave you every chance to back out." "I'm sorry," she sobbed, sinking onto the couch. "I made a huge mistake. I want to fix this. Please, Mike, can we try to work it out?" Her eyes were pleading, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved for 10 years was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "No," I said, standing up. "It's too late. I've already filed for divorce. Papers will be served to you and Jake on Monday. You're out of chances." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, sobbing harder. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I just watched, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. That night, I locked myself in the master bedroom and checked the camera feed again. Jake was still in room 125, alone, pacing and talking on the phone, probably trying to salvage his marriage. I saved the footage and started organizing it for Tom. I also packed Emily's clothes into garbage bags, ready to toss them out the next day. She could sleep in the guest room tonight, but after that, she was gone. I wasn't just ending this marriage. I was making sure Jake and Emily paid for every second of pain they'd caused me. And I wasn't done yet. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in days. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it was mixed with a sense of purpose. Emily had made her choice. Jake had shown his true colors, and now it was time to finish what I'd started. I got up, showered, and checked the camera feed from room 125 one last time. Jake had checked out late last night, looking defeated as he dragged his suitcase to his car. The room was empty now, but I had everything I needed: hours of footage, recordings, and emails that would bury them both. I saved it all to a USB drive for Tom and started getting ready for the day. Emily was in the guest room when I went downstairs. I'd left her there last night, crying and begging for forgiveness, but I wasn't budging. She'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. I grabbed the garbage bags full of her clothes and hauled them to the front yard, piling them up near the curb. She came out as I was finishing, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Mike, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Getting rid of your stuff," I said, not looking at her. "You're not staying here anymore. Divorce papers will be served to you at work tomorrow. You can figure out where to go after that." She grabbed my arm, trying to stop me. "Please, Mike, don't do this. I know I messed up, but I love you. We can still fix this. I'll do anything, counseling, whatever you want. Just give me a chance." Her voice cracked, and for a split second, I felt a pang of guilt. 10 years of memories flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, lazy Sundays, the life we'd built. But then I remembered her kissing Jake on our porch, her excitement about betraying me, and the guilt vanished. "No," I said, pulling my arm free. "You had your chance. You chose Jake over me, and you don't get to take that back now that it's blown up in your face. I'm done, Emily. You need to leave." She stood there, tears streaming down her face, but I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. I heard her sobbing outside, but I didn't look back. I spent the rest of the day changing the locks on the house and the garage door code, making sure she couldn't get in. I also went to the bank, closed our joint accounts, and moved my money into a new one under my name only. I canceled every credit card we shared, leaving her with half the checking account balance and her car, but she'd have to handle the payments herself. By the time I was done, I felt like I'd taken back control of my life. Monday morning, I drove to Tom Bradley's office with the USB drive. He plugged it into his computer and watched the footage from the hotel: Sarah's confrontation, Jake's lies, Emily's breakdown. "This is more than enough," he said, leaning back in his chair. Adultery's clear as day, and with Jake's wife filing too, we've got a strong case. I'll have the papers served to Emily at her workplace this afternoon, and Jake will get his at the same time. We're also suing him for alienation of affection. You've got a solid shot at a favorable settlement, Mike. Thanks, Tom, I said, shaking his hand. I just want this over with. He nodded and promised to keep me updated. I left his office and headed to a nearby coffee shop to wait. Around 3, my phone rang. It was Emily, and she sounded furious. Mike, what the hell is this? She demanded. I just got served divorce papers at work, in front of everyone. And Jake's being sued? Are you serious? Dead serious, I said, keeping my voice calm. I told you there'd be consequences. You didn't listen. Now you're dealing with the fallout. I can't believe you'd do this to me, she said, her voice breaking. I thought you loved me. I did, I said, my tone hard. But you threw that away. You and Jake can figure out how to deal with this mess. I'm done talking. I hung up before she could respond, then blocked her number. I didn't need to hear her excuses anymore. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Sarah, Jake's wife. She'd tracked me down through Tom, who'd given her my number with my permission. Mike, it's Sarah Carter, she said. I wanted to thank you for the evidence you sent my lawyer. It's going to help me take Jake to the cleaners. I'm sorry you got caught up in this too. No problem, I said. I'm glad it's helping you. Jake's an asshole, and he deserves whatever's coming to him. She laughed, a bitter sound. You're right about that. My lawyer says we can coordinate with yours to make sure he pays for what he did to both of us. I'm also kicking him out tonight. He can sleep in his car for all I care. Good for you, I said. I've already kicked Emily out. They can rot together. We talked for a few more minutes, agreeing to keep in touch if our cases overlapped. When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie. Sarah and I were in the same boat, and we were both ready to sink Jake and Emily for good. That night, I sat on the couch in my quiet house, a beer in hand, reflecting on everything. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but it was fading. I'd taken back my life, piece by piece, and I was starting to see a future without Emily. I thought about selling the house, splitting the money with her as the divorce papers outlined, and moving somewhere new, somewhere I could start over. I even let myself think about dating again, meeting someone who'd value me the way Emily never did. A week later, I got a call from Tom. The divorce was moving fast. Emily hadn't contested it, probably because she knew the evidence was airtight, and Jake was scrambling to save his own marriage, but Sarah wasn't backing down. The alienation of affection lawsuit against Jake was gaining traction, and Tom was confident we'd win a decent settlement. You're almost free, Mike, he said. Just a few more weeks, and this will all be behind you. Thanks, Tom, I said, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. I'm ready to move on. I hung up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing another beer. I stepped outside onto the porch, looking at the spot where Emily and Jake had kissed. It didn't hurt as much anymore. I'd survived their betrayal, and I'd come out stronger. As I sipped my beer, I thought about the future. The house was mine for now, but I'd sell it soon and split the profits with Emily, just to be done with her. I'd use my share to buy a smaller place, maybe somewhere near the coast. I pictured myself there, free from the past, starting fresh. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Emily and Jake had tried to break me, but they'd failed. I was still standing, and I was going to be okay.